Hello. So hopefully you guys can hear me. So let's test sound first before I start really talking. All works. Okay, fantastic. So the next step is going to be to try and get music going. So no, we don't want to listen to that. We want to listen to something else. Here we go. Because copyright is a thing. Um, okay. So I'm Carmen. I'm one of the, let's say, realism artists here at Firestorm. I predominantly enjoy working in a film workflow, but having said that, uh, my professional experience has been more on the indie game side. Um, I'm also really struggling with the noise of the music over focusing to talk, but anyway, we're going to work with it. So, Houdini. And why am I doing this in Houdini? Quick note before we get actually into it. Firstly, hello everyone. And yes, we are doing this in Houdini because I think Houdini is a underutilized software. So, is it really underutilized? Maybe not, but I think it's underutilized. Because, for example, right, if this is already a 3D model, but I'll probably put my own twist on it. Um, but if you start looking at these lanterns, there's a lot of elements that are identical across the board. So there's these archways up here, and it's the same everywhere else. So this means it's ideal for doing a Houdini because if I build a node system that can build one of these, I can repurpose it to build the others relatively quickly. So I will give you a quick note, and that is I have not opened Houdini in a year. I opened it on Monday, did a quick rundown of it, and decided, well, I'm going to make it work. Now, that's probably not my best decision because if there's anything you know about Houdini, it's intense, right? It's a difficult software to use, it's intimidating, and it's especially difficult to do live because things go wrong. Houdini is built to basically you problem solve the whole way through. Now, that's why I love Houdini. I love problem solving. Um, I get bored very quickly. I struggle to sculpt the entire day, but I can spend the entire day in Houdini and never get bored just because I'm constantly struggling. So, without further ado, let's actually get into the software. Now, most of you probably have not used Houdini before. It is predominantly used for special effects and that type of thing, but you can model in it, at least to a certain degree. Like, there's a stage where you can't get any further than. And yes, I do like suffering, because if I'm suffering, I can't think about the fact that people are watching me work. So we're going to run with it. So, first things first, let's start setting up the node network. The first thing I'm kind of looking at for this concept is the base shape. So there's a top and a bottom to this, but I'm not too concerned about that. That's going to be really easy to do, and the nodes I build for the rest of it can probably be repurposed for the top and the bottom. So the base shape is a hexagon type of shape, so which is a geometry shape. So we'll start with a geometry node. I'm going to name it lantern because I'm probably going to build everything within this. So let's do that. And then we're going to need, you can use a cylinder or you can use a tube. So let's do a cylinder, why not? All right, quickly checking the chat here. Pain is a very good friend. It makes you suffer, but it also helps you to learn. So without pain, there is no learning. So I'm probably gonna reduce these segments down to one. Um, this, for those of you that haven't used Houdini before, this menu is a bit like, yeah, it's a bit like attribute editor. So in Maya, this is the place where you set all your settings. Once you get a cube, whatever you want to call, whatever you want to have. But the difference between Houdini and Maya is you never lose this menu. I believe in 3ds Max you also, no, you do eventually lose it depending on what formers you use and how you model and if whether you start getting destructive at some point. But in Houdini you literally never lose it. At some point it might break. But at that stage, quite honestly, if it starts breaking, you need to fix something else in your system. So I'm probably going to go for 6 sides. I know this reference probably has more than that. It probably has 8. But we're going to go with 6. So that's a base of it. Now, I'm going to build 2 things. Firstly, I'm going to build the center piece, and that's just going to be for reference points. It's going to be a reference point for the size, but at some stage I will cancel this middle section out just so it's not there anymore because, well, it becomes irrelevant at the stage. So the next thing I'll need is the top and the bottom. So let's get another cylinder. Now, here's sort of where the procedural element of Houdini comes in. I want this piece, let me just move my concept, because my concept is going to be in the way. I'll show it once I've set it up, let's put it that way. So first thing, I want to change the height, so that's over here, so I'm going to change the height down. And I want both of these to be visible just so I can see what's going on. So that's a merge node. It's not quite combining the two. They're still separate entities, but you can see them at the same time. Or you can template it. So the template is basically a wireframe of what the combined 2 pieces would be. So if I press this button over here, I can view both at the same time. But for now, I think templating is fine, and I predominantly want to view this one. Right. So I'm going to change what? Let's say the inner radius to 0.15. The height is probably fine. Right. Now, this is fine. Right? But if I merge this, we've got very funny music going on. Wait, let me skip this song. It's annoying. Okay, so the first problem we're encountering is you can see this inner geometry is going through the outer foot area, let's say. So to fix that, I'm going to say this one needs to move, so that is a transform. Now, a transform node is a bit of a no-no in the sense of it does ruin some proceduralism. But it's sometimes worth it. I'm trying to decide if I want to pivot. It could be Final Fantasy. Gerald of Rivia. It's Witcher music. But it might have been the fantasy music that I skipped. Sorry. So I can do this one of 2 ways, because I need a top and a bottom, right? And the top and the bottom is identical. So I can either first model the top and duplicate down, or I can model the bottom and duplicate up. Let's leave it like this for now. And I'm going to take the height. And let's see if I can remember how to do this. I believe we paste that into that. Okay, then it moves up. So that's not quite what we want. Instead, we're gonna do what? We're gonna invert this. So that's gonna be a 1, and that's gonna be a 0.2, not 25, 15. And we're gonna go rotate this 180. And it's fixed, right? Now it's at the bottom. So that's what I want. I want this at the bottom. So from here, we're gonna need the top. But along with needing the top, my next problem is if I scale this inner part of the cylinder, all right, nothing happens to the outer. I do not want that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy probably that parameter. And then I'm going to paste that into this one, I believe. And now it scales accordingly. And then the next thing I'm going to do is, that was the inner, I believe. Let's see if I remember correctly. Yeah. For the outer, I'm going to do the same, but times 0.15. No. We're going to try that again. We're going to do maybe times 1.15. There we go. Now, in theory, this should adjust accordingly. Right. I don't actually know if I want that on the outer radius. Nope, we're going to pivot again. So, going to take, which one's the bottom? That one's the bottom, so we're going to take that one and paste that into this. Now, there we go, it's working. That's what we want. Right, so we've got that working. Next thing we need is we need that on top, right? So that's going to be a copy and transform. So paste that into that. And of course, it starts off doing nothing. Again, going to template that. The first thing we want to do is we need it to be upside down. So that's going to rotate by 180. But now you notice it's at the bottom. We don't want that. So what are we going to do? We're going to take the height, copy that parameter, and paste it into the translation. And like magic, it is at the top. We can adjust the height and everything works accordingly. So we've now officially got our lantern. I probably set this at a height of 2. Now at this stage I can kind of start deciding what I want to do and how I want to approach this. Because in theory, if I wanted to, I can place a control here at the bottom. And this could be the start of the system and something I adjust here, or I can put a control all the way at the bottom. That's basically a button that combines the settings of these. Wait, let me demonstrate. So that's going to be a null. There are different ways of doing this. This is just my preferred method. So we can go and edit up here. And if I can get my menu somewhere. Where is my menu? Hopped over on the different screen. So we want floats. So I'm going to need one for the height and one for the width. And let's just start with that. So the one is going to be height. And we're going to label it, no, not that, height. And then the other one is going to be width. No, don't do that. What are the rest of you guys working on? Just to give us something to talk about, because I can talk about Houdini forever, but there's other things to talk about too. Right. So in the meantime, so this is the control, but as you notice, nothing happens. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy these, and we're going to paste it into what? Into the height. The pirate. I hope it will be finished because I want to see it. We're coincidentally on music that also reminds me of pirates. So, right, so you'll notice when I pasted the information into the cylinder's height, our cylinder went flat, so now I've got that setting. So if I now can adjust it down here at the bottom and I don't have to scroll back up. Because now things can get huge. I mean, it can get really huge. So having areas where you can start adjusting things really, really helps. Right, so now I can adjust the height for the width. I'm also going to copy that parameter, and then I'm going to paste that into this. And our thing is going to disappear, but don't worry, I've got it back. Right. So now we've got that set up. It's probably the easiest part of the setup. The next part is not going to be difficult because there's two ways you can approach it. Right? You can code it. Now, if you know anything about me, it's that I'm absolutely terrified of coding. So we're not going to code it. We're going to use something else. Right. So we're going to forget about what we built over here, and we're going to start with a line. For some added clarity, the thing I'm trying to make here is this archway. The big one. So, let me bring my concept back because I have a tendency to put that off to a different screen. Right. So, another thing about Houdini, your system will disappear once you click off it. It's fine. We don't have to worry about it. It's still there. It's just not visible. It's basically like hiding it. So once we've got the line, we're going to need a few different things. The first one is the line does not come with normals by default, right? So first thing we're going to need is normals, because the normals is going to determine how the line moves. Now that sounds very complicated, but it's pretty simple. So we're going to add an attribute create. Now there's all 3D software has these things. Houdini just makes it visible and usable. I'm quickly going to split my tab to get a geometry spreadsheet. So here you can kind of see what comes with it by default. It has a X, Y, and Z direction. It has point numbers. Now points are a bit like vertices, but not quite. It's pretty much vertices. They work a bit differently, but if you understand vertices, they're basically like that. So you'll notice there's a 0 and a 1. That just means one of these are labeled as 0 and another is labeled as 1. If we go and enable this, it is tiny, but you can see there is a number 1. There is a way to make it larger. I'm trying to think how. I could probably do it here. Numbers. View and map scale. There's a way of doing this. Geometry. I quite frankly can't remember how to do it. So we're going to leave it at that. Just believe me, there's a 1 and there's a 0. So that's kind of what comes default with the line. So the next thing we're going to need is normals. So normals, each attribute has a name. So thank you for believing me. So every attribute has a name. So normal is n. There's obviously points, which is also an attribute. There's groups, which I wouldn't really call an attribute, but I mean you can technically call that. It's data. It's all data. So n is one of them. So we're going to name it n, not m, n. And it typically goes point, so the class is point. It's not a primitive. So primitive would be like a cube, and a point is similar to a vertex, and then you've got a vertex, which is actually a vertex, right? So we're going to be a point, and normals is usually a vector, which means it goes from 0 to 1, right? Float will have 0.1 and 0.2 and etc, etc, but a vector is just, it's either 0 or it's 1. So in this case, that's going to be a 1. And if we then go up here and enable normals, you'll see we've got a normal direction, which is brilliant. The next thing we need is a mask, because the thing we're going to build here is basically a curve, and that curve is going to determine the shape of the archway. But we don't want the top to be affected. We only want the bottom to be affected. So we need a mask. And to mask it, we're going to use curve U. Now, how do we get curve U? We go and we get a resample node. Now, resample is used for a couple of things. You can add points to it, as it does automatically. You'll see it added points, which is a bit like subdividing. You've got different settings here. You can adjust the level of detail. You can say, I want a specific number of segments, or you can say you want your segments to be a specific height. So in this case, I'm going to leave it at the maximum amount of segments, so that's going to be 10. And then moving on from that, we're going to get the curve U. So to get the curve U, if you go down here, there's a button, because Houdini is brilliant and there's buttons for everything. So in the resample node, there's a checkbox and you click, I want curve U, right? So we've got the curve U. Now, how do we make this move? Because I'm not going to go in and manually select each vertex and make it work that way. So instead of doing that, we're gonna use, if I remember the name for this, is the attribute VOP. It is attribute VOP. Okay, so we're gonna use attribute VOP, and we're gonna plug that in there, and we're gonna open that. So this comes by default with a couple of different settings. We've got P for point, we've got velocity, and a bunch of other things that are commonly used. So we're going to need a couple of things. We're going to need point, and we're going to need normal, right? But we also need curve U, and curve U is not automatically built into this, which is very, very inconvenient, because we do want curve U. So, Houdini is a bit inconvenient in the sense of there's not a straightforward import button that works by default. By that I mean, over here you can import something by adding a file node, right? You can add it by file node. But over here, you can't. Instead of using a file node or import node, I think there might be an import one here as well. Yeah, you can import as well, but that doesn't work in attribute VOP. Instead of using import, you're going to use a bind. You also have a bind export, but we won't need that today. So now we need to tell it what it needs to bind. In this case, it's curve U, because if we go over here in our thing, we can probably see it somewhere. Yeah. I'm actually going to show you what curve U looks like. So let's go back a minute and turn curve U on. And there you can see the color gradient. That is our mask, which is brilliant. Right, so in the bind, we need to specify that we want the curve U. So we're going to name it curve U. And it automatically knows the curve U we're specifying here is the same one that is over here, right? So that is, we're going to leave it as a float. Now, we've got all our things we need. We need the points, we've got that. We've got normal, and we've got the curve view. So the next thing we need is a ramp. And the ramp is going to be the thing that determines the shape of our archway. So that's going to be a ramp parameter, right? So in the ramp parameter, we're going to plug the curve U, and we're going to change it from RGB because you can use this for color, and turn it into spline. Now it's not going to do anything at this stage, but you do have this wonderful ramp to play around with, and that will be the thing that determines the profile of our curve or archway. So we've got that. Next thing we need is something to push the line in the direction of the normals while keeping the mask in mind. Now Houdini is again brilliant, so we've got a node for that, and that's called displace along normals or along normal. So we're going to need that. Now it needs a bunch of different data. It firstly needs the points, and it needs normals, and then it also needs something to determine how much things moves. So that would be the amount. So the ramp determines the amount, the rest determines the direction. Right. Quickly changing my settings over here to get a prettier setup. You can spend a lot of time on organization. I highly encourage you to spend a lot of time on organization, but that's pretty boring to watch. We're not going to spend too much time on it. And then displacement goes into P. Now this is your output node. That's basically saying everything that's built here needs to go out. And this is also a place where you would use bind export, because this output only has a few different types of data it can export. One being points, the other being velocity, force, color, and normal. Right? So more than that, we need more than that, basically. Or if we need more than that, we can use a bind export in its place. Right. Now we've got a working thing. And the problem is the wrong side is moving, so we can just flip it. Right. Now this isn't very pretty as it is, right? It's a very straight line. We don't want that. So we're going to move over to either Bezier or B-spline. They have different uses. They give a different appearance. I generally try one and see what happens. So let's do a Bezier and start to shape our curve. And I need to actually look how I'm shaping it, not, well, look at the graph, so to speak, and not at the viewport. So this is a very pointy curve, and to get that curve, I'm probably going to need to adjust the height. And that's again going to be with a control, and I know at the bottom, and I know I'm going to implement that control, so I'm not going to adjust the height now, because then I'll have to adjust it again later. So I've made kind of a mental note of this needs to happen at some point. So next thing you're noticing is this is great, but it's only in one direction, and we need to mirror it. So we're going to use a mirror node, of course. Why not? So that's going to be a mirror. And plug that in, and we've got a mirror. Now herein lies our next problem, and that is the fact that, as you know, this line comes with point numbers and points, but on this side it's going from 0 to 10, and the other side it's going from 21 to 11. Now, why is this a problem? Well, let's find out. Because the next thing we're going to need to do is we're going to need to sweep this curve. So if I sweep this as it is, there's technically the same as you would have in Maya. We have two faces on top of each other. It's like that, but with vertices or points. So if I plug this in and as you can see here, it's looking for more data. It's looking for a profile. Now, I'm not going to use a profile for now, so we're just going to do a round tube, and I'm going to make that visible. And if we turn curve view off, we've got two problems. You see it's acting weird here, it's acting weird there, and this is facing the wrong way, right? So let's fix that. First thing we're going to fix is the point order. So to fix that, we're going to use a join node. And not only does this now go from 0 to 20 in this direction, it also fixed our overlapping vertice in the center, which is brilliant. Now, in theory, it should work fine, but it does not. And why is that? Well, firstly, the normal direction is the wrong way, but we'll leave that for now. Next thing that's wrong is, let's go look at our normals. We've got one that's pointing that way, and we've got one that's pointing the other way, which is fine, except not, because you'll see it still goes weird. So to fix that, we need something called, I believe it's orient along curve, which changes the normal direction. The normals are now flowing alongside the curve. Now, if we sweep it, it actually looks correct. Now, at some stage, I'm probably gonna change the profile on this, because if we look at the concept, it's not the same shape. It's not the correct shape. I'm glad you think this is cool. I think this is cool as well. I absolutely love working in Houdini. I just wish I knew more so I could use it more. It's a intense software with so many parts to it. I'd say this type of style of doing more, I wouldn't say cathedral type of look, but a cathedral type of look is probably the easiest way to get introduced to the software for modeling. I've also made a robot that's procedural in it, a simple one, a very simple one, with a similar setup, but a lot more complex. And if I were to have to recreate it right now, I wouldn't be able to, of course. But yeah, it's brilliant. It makes me happy. Right, so we've got that. Now, the next thing we need is a couple of things. We can start looking at the size to make sure it aligns with the overall, let's say, that size. Or alternatively, we could start looking at building more parts of the curves. In this case, I think I'm probably going to first trying to decide what's going to do the least amount of damage, because things are going to get interesting. It's really going to get interesting because we're going to be looking at, basically, if I scale this in height and width, I want the archways to adjust accordingly. And not only do I want the archways to adjust accordingly, I want them to stay perfect. Which comes with a couple of challenges, because I need to adjust width, I need to adjust height, and I need to adjust position. Because by default, my archway is in the middle. So that's not ideal, right? If let's template this. Okay, so firstly, it's very much too big. But it is in the middle of the world, which is ideal, but I want it to move. I really do want it to move. So we're going to have our challenges, but it's going to be fun. So let's start with the easiest, which is probably going to be width. And I think I'm going to cheat a bit. Quite possibly I'm going to cheat a bit. But the problem is, okay, so I can go and I can say, well, I'm going to scale this up until it aligns with the scale of my archway. But the problem is, if somebody later down the line, let's say I build this tool for building these lanterns and I hand it over to the next person to play around with. If they then go below the value I set here, everything breaks. So that's not quite ideal, is it? So we're gonna have an interesting time, but let's leave it at 2 for now. Now 2 is a nice number, because that just means, how do I put this? The math is easy. Let's leave it at that. The math is easy. Now I am not the best at math, so me going in depth on the math behind it is gonna be a train wreck. Hi. I'm so glad for you guys joining my first stream. It's really cool. It's keeping me on my toes, so that's a good thing too. Right, so let's leave that at 2. The next thing we're going to need is something to resize it accordingly. So we're going to go with transform. And we're going to plug that in. Now again, transform node is one of those things. People argue it's not the most procedural way of doing it. And they say if you can avoid using a transform, do it. Now, I do use transforms a lot. I just try to keep them somewhat procedural still. So in order to do that, I will copy this value. This width value, and then I'm going to paste it into the width. So that's going to be on the x-axis, so paste relative reference, and then we're going to times 0.5. Is it going to work? Please work. I think it works. Let's see. Let's play around and see if it does scale accordingly. And it does. But the part I don't like is it's making the sweep weird. So that means we need to move the sweep down. So we're going to move that down. And now, if we scale this, it no longer breaks the sweep. Which is brilliant. It makes me very happy. So we're going to leave that at 1. Why not? Right, so that's one aspect of it. The next is height. Now, I also want this to be, what is that, a quarter of the height, more or less. So we're going to go, and I'm going to forget about the sweep for now because the sweep is too big. I need to scale the sweep down, so we'll do that in a second. So we'll ignore the sweep. The sweep does not exist. And we're going to take our height parameter and paste that into the y. I believe it's y. It should be the y. The y-axis. So let's paste relative references. And then it's going to be also, no, it's not going to be times, it'll be times 0.25. Right? Then, now that's tiny, but if we actually go and scale the height, it'll fix itself and actually be a quarter of the height, which again makes me very happy because things are working. While it's working, it's great. When it's not, it's less than great. But for the time being, it's working, so that's fantastic. And we can also, instead of making it taller, we can make it narrower to get that more narrow look. I also at some point want to build a control for these pieces at the top and the bottom. I want them to get taller. I want a setting to make it taller, and I want a setting to change the width here, maybe. Possibly. We'll see how complex I make it. Basically, the sky is the limit. Houdini, sky is the limit. You can do anything, you just need to figure out how. Especially when you're starting out in the software, Google is your new best friend. And in fact, when I have Houdini open, I usually have Google off to the side because I'm going to be Googling stuff. The only reason I'm not doing so today is because I've done a cathedral type thing in Houdini before. Granted, as I mentioned before, it was a year ago. So we're winging it. It's fine. Right, so next thing we need is these two little archways, which is fine. We can make that. And to do that, we're going to repurpose probably the majority of this. So I'm just deselecting everything and duplicating it across. The place where it's going to get, I wouldn't say interesting, but where we're going to start adjusting things a little bit is probably at the transform point. So I'm going to template not the sweep, this original archway. And I want this to be smaller. I want this to be smaller, and I want it to be less than half the height. So half the height would be 1.25, something like that. So let's try 0.1. Yeah, that's fine. And then for width, it's going to need to be half that, so that's 2.5. And then I need this to move that way by 50%. So let's see if I can remember how to do this. We're going to take width, and we're going to take that into translate, and we're going to see what it does. Now that moves way too much, so let's try 0.25. Perfect! But it's not. I say it's perfect, but it's not. And the reason for that is, yes, it's perfect, but if I go and sweep this, that archway is going to go inside of the other one, and I don't quite want that. So I need to adjust two things, because if I just adjust this position, it's fine, but now it's going over the center line. I don't want that. So I'm also going to adjust the scale. Now we're going to play around with it and see if I can just use the same value, and yes, I can. So that's going to be 3 and 3. Still not close enough. I can adjust this at a later stage, but we'll keep that for now. Do that for... Right. Not perfect, but good enough. Next thing we're going to need is a mirror, because now that I've just saw I've seen our next problem, right? Now, having these perfectly in the center is great, except for the fact that now the sweeps of the two archways that connect to the center will also overlap. So we don't want that either. We're going to do what? We do want the translate, but let's just see what 0.5 does. Okay, we're going to leave it at the 0.25. And we're going to scale this a bit more down. We might need more than that. We might not. Let's do a 22. That gives it a little bit of breathing room. Right, so mirroring that across. And I actually do not like how big that gap is. Moving back. This is the thing about Houdini, right? It's always a lot of back and forth. You do one thing, and you see what it does, and then you go back and alter it. In fact, when I first learned Houdini from my mentor. And when I said I want to learn Houdini, the first thing he told me was he does not do live demos of Houdini just because of how much back and forth there is. There's no way if someone comes up to you and says, build me this thing in Houdini and show me how you do it. It's never going to be a linear approach. It's never going to be linear. There's always going to be, you're going to start a step, you're going to see what it does. Then you're going to change your approach. And oftentimes, you build a node network like this, and by the time you've got it finished, you start over. Because you're not happy with the result and you think you could have done it a better the second time, maybe made it more procedural, whatever it may be. Right, so keeping that in mind, I don't like that there's not an equal distance in between these two archways in comparison to those two. So let's fix that. We're probably, let's try 4. That's better, but now the big test will be, if I start altering the width, does it stay consistent? And it does. Fantastic, so that's working. I now need a few things, and I need to decide something at this point. Do I want a universal control that it controls the shape of just the exterior? No. Do I want one that controls both the exterior archway and the interior one? Or do I want one that splits them apart? Now, in this case, I'm probably going to opt to split it apart. So let's do that. We're going to make 2. So firstly, I want to combine these. Do I want to combine them? Actually, do I want to? I do want to combine them eventually. Question is, do I want to do it now or later? Let's combine it. It's fine. I'm also going to add a name at this point. Now, why am I adding a name? When you use different nodes in Houdini, you've got ways of specifying what gets affected, right? So if we look at an example of something, let's see. I can specify a group, or I could specify in here, I can specify also a group. Now, a name can be a way of grouping objects. So you can group by name, for example. So let's do, instead of giving a name, let's give it a group name. Let's do that. Group. That's not called a group. What is it called? Now here's where my memory fails me. So let's see. Group. It is called group. I don't know what didn't pop up, but anyway, so the group name is going to be outer arch. And then we're going to duplicate that across, and that's going to be inner arch. Inner arches, probably, because it's 2. Right? Because I do want different I want the same profile but different sizes, right? Because if you look at the concept, or in this case probably a 3D model, the outer arch is bigger than the smaller one. So if I want to replicate that, or if I want a different profile for the 2 arches, I want to be able to specify them to split. So that's going to be inner, and that's going to be outer. And we're gonna do what? We gotta call that inner arches, and I like to. Are we gonna specify? Okay. Now we can find the group on what is in the group here. So we can see if I got that selected, it selects those 2. Fantastic. If I select this one, it selects that. Now we have got a sweep here. I'm going to remove that. We'll worry about the sleep at a later stage. Right, so that's all working. Control plus G, universal key for all groups over all 3D software. That's useful to know. That's very useful to know. I did not know that applies to Houdini specifically. I've been using the menus like a lunatic. So moving on from that, we've now got our groups. The next thing we need is to place these. And herein lies our biggest obstacle. This is also something I've not experimented with. But basically, I want to tell Houdini to move the archway forward to the position of the front of the cylinder. And then I want to tell it to copy and transform around, right? I'm not completely sure how we're going to do that, so bear with me as I try to figure this out. So the first thing we're going to need is probably a transform node, so let's start there. So that's the transform node, and I want to preview this. I'm going to need the width. And I'm going to paste that into the Z direction. So that's going to be on translation, paste relative reference. And we would be so lucky for it to actually be perfect. But it's not. It's not perfect. So we're going to have to figure out a value that works. So let's think. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? It also doesn't stay constant, which is very inconvenient. That is very, very inconvenient. So how are we going to approach this? It's definitely not 1, so it's not to a value of 1. So value, if you copy and paste parameters, it's by default equal values. So it's going to be slightly less. The question is, what percentage? Okay, so it's definitely less than that. Let's try 0.9. And then before I adjust further, I want to see if it breaks at any time. It stays relatively, the distance is increasing and decreasing, but it's not going through itself or through the cylinder when I scale down. So I'm going to continue down this path for now. I can always pivot at a later stage. I'm not restricted to this. Now, this is slightly inside. Now I can argue and say, well, maybe I want it that way. Because if we start placing pillars, it's probably going to be the pivot. Yeah, we can move the pivot. We can move the pivot. But I don't want to move the pivot yet. Because I'm going to use the pivot point, because if the pivot point is at 0, I can rotate this around. Yeah, okay, wait, let's let's continue down this path. 8586. I'm going to stick with 86 for the reason that I do want this to be slightly inside the lantern, because I missed the reference. I'm sorry. I'm not going to ignore you though. That I just can't. I can't ignore you. You're here and you're talking to me, and it would be rude to ignore. Right. So if I place the pillars, I'm going to place them. I'm going to copy them to points, right? To the points on this cylinder. And if I place them here, the point will be the center point. It'll be like a world origin, basically, where it spawns. So, depending on the scale of the pillars, I might want the archways to be slightly inwards, just so it looks better, and doesn't clip through the pillars. So we're gonna keep it like that for now. And again, with Houdini, nothing is set in stone ever. It's just not. So due to nothing being set in stone, that does mean I might go back at a later stage and start changing things again. So that is also something I'm keeping in mind. And I'm also thinking about something else, and that is the second I adjust the amount of segments, everything will break. So due to that, I can go and I can really start thinking hard, how would I approach that? But I think for today, that's a bit much, especially considering how long I've not used the software. So we're going to leave that at that for now. So now it does follow the position. The next thing we need is we need to copy and transform around. So copy and transform that one. We've got it. Right. Now by default, it obviously does nothing. But we can go and we can start rotating. I hope it uses the pivot by default. It keeps the pivot. We'll see what it does. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. So no, not that one. It's probably going to be this one. And it does a whole lot of nothing. So the big question is, where's the rest of them? Let's try 180 for now. I just want to see where it's turning. Right, so... Okay, I've got it. So we're going to quickly divide 360 by, what's the amount of segments? 6. This amount of segments is 6. I'm not good at math, so I'm going to Google it. I'm especially not good at math when I'm talking, so we're going to do that. Divided by 6, that's 60. So, in theory, magic. We've got magic. Now we've got curves right around, so I am officially happy. Right? I'm very happy. Okay, so we've got that. Now, we also need this to be at the top. So we're going to need another setting. So that's going to be copy and transform again. And then it's going to be, it's going to flip 180. Right? Now that's actually a very pretty shape, but that's not what we're looking for. Hi Haley, how are you? Sorry guys, I'm trying to keep track of everything, but if I miss a message in the chat, hopefully I'll get to it. So yes, right, so we've rotated that around, and I'm now going to move it so that it goes to the top of this. So let's get the length here somewhere, so that'll be, well, I say length, the height. Copy parameter and paste relative references into the translation height. And that works too. Now I can be even more happy. So we've got that working. The next thing we are going to need is, let me get my reference. We need to start building all these different elements. I'm going to deviate away from the concept, probably completely. And I have not followed the most logical direction for this because, right? Well, I say not the most logical. I don't want to have to change. I don't want to have to do the rotation and the moving up and the mirroring on top, etc. again later down the line. So I'm going to keep this at the bottom, but I'm going to move up to here. And I'm going to be placing the details at this stage, right? So what are we going to be doing now? We're going to be building ornate details. Now, do I have a reference for these ornate details I want to be creating? No, I do not. But we're going to wing it. So there's a few ways you can do this. You can do it with curves. You can do it with anything really. You can do it with curves. You can do it with circles. You can do it with whatever your heart desires. I think we're going to start off with, I'm going to build it with a circle for now because that's the simplest, but I'm probably going to change it to a curve at some point because why not? And I can even go and I can use the line to make a profile, mirror that across as I have done with the arches, and then I'm doing that. I did not explain that very well, but we're going to do it. So I'm going to steal our lines over here. I don't want the group. Maybe I do at a later stage. We'll see. Right, so no, duplicate. Thank you. Right, so we've got our archway here. Now, do I want specifically archway? Not necessarily. What am I doing? Okay, let's move that off to the side. I do not want this mirror. Well, do I? I want that to be gone. So let's get rid of that mirror. And I don't want the transform either. Or do I? We're going to keep the transform, but we're not going to worry about that. I don't want the position. The scale can stay for right now, but I do not want the position. So let's zero that out. Because as these things go, the longer you can stay at the origin, the better. It just leaves less room for things to go wrong. Right, so that's that. Now, if I keep this as is, right, and I use a copy and transform, and I copy the number of copies, brilliant, and I paste them into the rotation. I'm going to have to check if this is the right rotation to copy them into, but we'll see that in a second. And I divide it by 360. No. 360 divided by. I now get something brilliant, which makes me very happy. But there's one part of it that I don't like very much, and that is what this curve is doing over there. So if I was to then sweep this, it would look bad. It just would. So before we do that, I'm quickly going to, let's see what join does. Because there is a way to do that. And then you can adjust the bias and the tolerance, 0. We'll keep that flat. Now, the reason I want this will become clearer once I copy and transform this across. Now, this looks bad, right? But what did I want to say? But we're going to work with it. Let's do a boolean. I'm also going to reduce the number of copies just so we simplify it a tiny bit. And trying to remember what the sieve, is it solid? Trying to remember what the settings were for this. Union, I think. Union. Because I want these dots. Because before I get there, there's no vertice or point that's determining the edge in that corner. Because it's a bunch of different objects, right? But if I union it, it turns into one object. I've got a lot of bad geometry. But we're going to dissolve it. So that's going to be a labs dissolve. Labs is a plugin. But it's basically a plug and play. So you dissolve that and you get your pretty thing. Now I would probably adjust that a little bit. And I can probably adjust the curve a bit because I like that shape, but it's a bit boring. Now I can only adjust to a certain point because I only have so many vertices. So what I can do is increase the amount of segments. Do I want to do it like that? Do I want to do it like that? Let's leave it for like that for now. Where is my profile? Right. I'm gonna switch this to B-spline. And we're gonna start playing with it and see what we can get. I'm not sure what I want actually. We can get a lot of interesting shapes, by the way. But regarding what I actually want to create, maybe something like that. Next thing I want to adjust, and that would be in the copy and transform. Is it though? Is it really? It's not in the copy and transform because, right, if I adjust, let's say, the translate and I move it up, it multiplies the value. Because that's what it's doing, right? Everything you do multiplies, which is not ideal. So instead of doing it there, I'm probably gonna adjust it here, but not by that much. Let's do 0.25. No. 3. Right. And we can probably resample this at some storage. Leave that at default. Let's do a resample. And it breaks everything, which is brilliant, right? So we're going to change that to maximum segments. Or are we? No. I'm not happy with that at all. Let's see what's going on. Right, so that's the problem. There's still an edge there. We're not going to remove inline point. And I suspect it's most likely because of this transform. So let's forget about the transform for now. We can always implement it later. And just do that for now. Now, in theory, if I do a resample now, it'll work. Yeah, of course it does. So we would do that by that amount. And kind of decide how pretty we want it. I'm still not happy with the shape, but let's leave that for now. And then start actually combining these. So, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Let's merge it for now, just see where it's at. Way too big. Way too big. So, trying to think what else I want to do before I actually start. What do I want to do? Because, right, the thing I'm thinking about now is, do I want to leave this as it is, scale it down and use it on maybe over here? Or do I want to put it at the top and make it more detailed? Choices, choices, choices. Let's leave it like that for now, just to see if we can get it working. Right, so now we've got our next difficulty, right? Because if I scale the archway, I want this to adjust accordingly. I do want this to adjust accordingly. I don't want this to break the second I scale the archway. Or, well, the main cylinder that then scales the archway, that then scales this, right? So, how are we going to do this? And now I would say this is slightly larger than the width of the archway. Now, what am I going to do with that knowledge? I can't tell you, and you probably don't know either. So, we're going to run with that knowledge. Whatever we can do with it, basically. Sorry. I should probably remember to drink water. You guys were nice and you haven't given me any orders yet. At least I don't think so. Let's go for it. I want this to be half the width. So I'm quickly going to, at least that's the starting point, right? So the width of the archway is 0.5 of the width of the what? Of the cylinder. It's 0.5 of the cylinder. So in theory, the thingamajig I just made, the flower thing, has to be 0.25, right? So firstly going to grab the width there. And hi, Firestorm Studio. I'm assuming it's possibly Heather, possibly, maybe. So hello, welcome to the utter chaos that is Houdini after a year of not opening Houdini. So we're gonna copy that parameter and we're gonna paste it into the scale. Rinse and repeat. Thank you. I'm happy to be here. It's actually went smoother than I thought I would. It's a file. There's been a few tiny mishaps where I've lost the plot, but it's okay. I think that's half the fun anyway. So that is going to be, what did I say, 0.25. But actually, no, it's going to be 0.25 on the uniform scale. I think. But we're gonna, okay, no, but I need that reference. So we're gonna delete that. That's gonna be 1. And then we're gonna copy relevant references and times that 0.25. And that's way too small in my opinion. Well, chaos, a little bit of chaos keeps it interesting, right? If it was smooth and easy and everything like that, would it really be worth doing? Now that's still too tiny. Let's leave it at 1 for a moment. No, it's not going to be 1. It's going to be, let's try 0.75. That might do the trick. That might do the trick. So we've got that. I actually want to move the pivot. So I'm going to, and the pivot needs to be determined by the scale. Because if I scale this up, no, I'm going to demonstrate that because that is very difficult to explain. So if I copy that parameter and I paste relative references and do that. No, I want the actual, do I want that? I don't know what I want. That's going to make it difficult. Right, so we're going to copy that and we're going to paste it. We'll work with it, we'll paste it. Now, we're going to multiply that. In theory, if I did the math correctly, by 1.25. Now we're going to see if I broke something. We're going to see if I broke something. Okay, so the width breaks. Why do you break? Why does it break? Okay, we're going back to the drawing board. Let's remove every sample for a start. I don't think it's that. The line isn't getting affected by anything. Attributes isn't getting affected by anything. Resample is not getting... Okay, so that's fine. It's not the mirror. It's not the join. It's not the orient. Transform. I think it's this. It's this. It's this. Let's delete channels on that. And that needs to be 1. Right, so to explain what's happening here is I've got two settings that's working against each other. I'm in the original archway, I built in a control that if the width of the cylinder or the actual lantern changes, the archway changes accordingly. And that's brilliant, but I've now duplicated that value across, which means that it's basically avalanche effect in a way, because at the top I've got a value that's multiplying the width, and then at the bottom I've also got a control that's multiplying the width, so they're kind of working against each other there. So in theory, if I delete that and right, but now I've got this mess. So what am I going to do? I'm going to adjust the scale, because this was at not 22. Let's do 0.5 for now. No, 7.5, just to see what we get. Now that's closer to what we had originally. Let's run with that for now. Boolean that. I just want to see if everything else is working. So transform. Right, so let's see what is actually still working. Let's not view that. I want to template that. So if I adjust the width, this adjusts accordingly, but I don't like that it's going down. Why is it going down? Because I messed with the pivot. It's going down because I messed with the pivot. So let's forget about the pivot for now. Delete that. 0 that. Right? Now, that's working. Width is scaling as I would want it to. Except this is way too big, right? So let's view that part. Now let's just get a decent number here. So let's do 1. And then let's see, what can we do? So this is too big, and I wonder if my original theory... No, that's the wrong place. Don't die. Okay. Well, is it the wrong place? Let's see. 2, 5. Why are you being a nuisance? Why are you being a nuisance? Let's see. Well, I knew it was going too smoothly. I mean, I did choose to do Houdini. Why would I make it easy for myself? I mean, it's not easy, but it is enjoyable at the same time. But let's see. Okay, so copy parameter, and that's going into the scale, and that's going to be times. I just want to see if it does something. Okay, so it does move now, so that's a start, and that's going to be 0.25. It works. It works. Now we need to see if the actual scale I tested is correct. And I'd say it's not. I don't think it is. I'm just going to get a more consistent width and height ratio so it's easier. I do not like that very much. I really do not like that very much. So Let's see. I do think I'm just going to move this up for a moment just to see what it is doing in the relation to the scale, and 0.25 is still too much. So let's do 0.2. And that is still too big. It's just too big for that. On the flip side, wait, let me test that in more detail. No, it is too big. There's no two ways about it. Let's do point, it's probably too small now, 1.5. That is definitely too small. So we're gonna do, I try, generally speaking, to work in 5, 10, 15, 20, that type of scale. But in this case, I'm gonna be forced to go with odd number, just so we can get a decent result, right? So that's fine. We'll work with that. And then the next thing I need is to actually get it into position. Now at the top there, you can see I had a very random value, and that was 0.31. I'm not quite happy with that, but again, we'll work with it. It is roughly half that. Okay, now getting my thoughts in order here. The next thing I want to do is I want the pivot to be at the bottom. Well, I want the bottom of this flower thing to align with the bottom of the floor in Houdini. So the scale is the thing determining the actual height. So let's paste relative references. And that's not going to be enough. So that is times 1. Start 1. No. Say 1.5. That's probably too much. 2.5. And that is exactly the bottom. So now I need to see if that continues, that value keeps working. Let's just get the front view. Right. So I've guessed that at that. I don't think that works. So let's see. Let's start with the default of 0 and then 1.5. That is slightly through the wall, but 1.5 is such a pretty number that I'm going to leave it. We're going to see what the impact is on the scale. If it stays relatively... It does not stay relatively in line. I actually do not like that at all. I do not like that at all. Am I going to fix it right now, though? Am I really going to fix it right now? I do not think so. But also, you can notice as we're scaling the width is fine, but now the height is wonky. And that's going to be something I need to keep in mind, right? Because with the way I've got things set up, the top and the bottom, the width and the height work independently, which works brilliantly on the archways, right? If we remove this, it works completely fine on the archways. I mean, sure, there's values that look, or ratios that look better than others, but generally speaking, by default, it looks good. So we're now running into the problem where I've chosen a circular shape. Now, I've got a workaround for it, but it's not going to be pretty. But we'll get to that. Because I've got a circular shape and my height and my width scale independently, that means if I duplicate the value for my width and put that into my uniform scale, it scales uniformly. It does not keep the height. It does not take the height into account. And Thank you. I'm really enjoying myself. I have been looking for an excuse to open Houdini for so long, and I've made myself an excuse, and it's fun. It's a lot of information though, so I'm probably not only breaking my own brain, but breaking other people's brains as well. So I mean, that can be good, it can be bad, it could be just fun. It's like, let's leave it at that. As a pretty number, I mean, it is though. I mean, one of those numbers. I'll make an exception for five, but a 10 and a 20 and a 30 and those types of even numbers are so easy to work with, because they're constant, and if you have to start multiplying around and you want to find an easy value, it's just simpler when you've got a constant number. So, where was I? I was at the circle. Oh, so by the way, Heather, I do not know how you do music and talking and working at the same time, because I'm currently tuning out the music to do this. Okay, so focus. We've got our problem, and that is we need to make a choice. How important is the circular shape of this flower? Because we have reached a point where we've got a little bit of ADHD, yes. Definitely a little bit. There's a reason I've got a notebook in front of me, and if something is not on the list, it does not happen. So, now, choice. The choice is I can make it so, yes, there will be a recording. In fact, if all my settings work, this is currently recording, which I think is brilliant. Well, it's brilliant because I'm going to forget how I did everything, and I'm probably going to have to watch the recording myself to figure out for future projects. I've just decided that I'm not so attached to the circular shape. So that means I can find a value to scale the height that will make it so that hopefully this flower continues to fit in between the archways. Welcome back, 3D Manic. Happy to have you back. I'm hoping my headphones don't die, by the way, because they said I've gotten a feeling that my headphones might die on me at some point, but we'll work with it. Okay, so height, width, got it. We are gonna take the height value, copy that, and I'm going to quickly look at what I've done with the height. So that's 0.25. Now, the archways are 0.1. So in theory, this needs to be 0.05. In theory. No, it'll probably also be 0.1, because we're not looking for half the value of the mini archways, we're looking for half the value of the archway. Okay, so roughly, more or less. Not completely, but let's say something along those lines. So we're gonna delete our uniform scale because we're no longer scaling uniformly, and we're gonna go into the height channel, which is the Y one, and that's place relative reference, and that's gonna be times 0.1 in theory. And we've lost it. We've lost it because I've still got the translate going on down here. So let's forget about the translate for now. And we're going to zero that value. Now, this is not very pretty. It's really not very pretty, but we're gonna forget about how ugly it is and just focus for a second and see if we can make this work. So that's a height. We're gonna take the width again, and we're gonna paste that into the scale, and that's gonna be what? Let's start with 0.5. It's not gonna be 0.5. It's definitely not 0.5. Let's try 2.5. Now, that's a very equal value. Why is that a very equal value? Am I happy with that? I am not happy with that. So that means my height is incorrect. Now, why is my height incorrect? There's no way this little piece over here is going to fit up there. It's too big. So that means it needs to be not 0.0. That might be closer. So let's just start moving it into place and see what it does. Yes, it's closer, but it's not perfect. In this case, it's not the height that's messing me up, it's the width. So that means the width needs to be less. Let's try 2.5. That's a very ugly number. Let's not do that. Let's try 0.2. Now that fits. But does it fit if I adjust the width? Now bear in mind, I've not set this up so that the position gets adjusted alongside the width and the height. So the position needs to be determined by the height, right? Because if I adjust the height, the archways move up, so therefore my flower needs to move up as well. So keeping that in mind, I can adjust the width to see if the width continues to work, but I can't see whether the height will work yet, at least not so easily. And I am fine with that. I can work with that. Right, so width works. Height, it does scale. I think we might be fine. But now I just need to figure out how to get the position to actually adjust accordingly. So that's going to be our next challenge. Because I've not gotten this to work with the experiments I've done thus far. So we're going to zero that out. First challenge, as we can see here, it's not flat on the ground. And that's not ideal. So what we're going to do is we're going to move up. We're going to move up because if I can fix this earlier, it might... Let's see if I can explain my thought process here. No, but it's not going to work. It's not going to work. Okay, so my plan was to adjust the position here and have this already, well, not here. I would have to add another transform after the copy to get it to 0 on the ground. But let's try it and see what it does. I don't think it's going to work, but if we try it, maybe it surprises me and it does work. That would be magic. So let's do a transform, and that's going to be copy the uniform, and the pivot's going to move. So paste that into that and times 0.5. That does nothing. That does absolutely nothing. Times 0.5. That also does not work for me. What happens if I leave that at default? Nothing good. Nothing good happens if I leave it at default. So that means it's a very funny number. 1.1. No. 1.25 is too much. 1.2 is just right. But, okay, so that does work. Right, so now it's just scaling there. So that is perfect for that. And now it is zeroed. But now the big question is, if I adjust the values, does it stay zeroed at the bottom? I think it does. I think it does. I think it does. Hello, the paint, paint dragon. That one. Hello, welcome. Nice to have you here. Right. So let's see. Let's see where my thought process is going here. We've got the width and we've got the height working. We've now determined the bottom position to stay on the bottom. It stays at the bottom of the floor, the ground, whatever you want to call it, and that's brilliant. Something I am thinking about right now is that's brilliant, but there does come an added difficulty. I'm pretty sure if I change the profile, it'll no longer be at the bottom. And I'm correct. But we're going to forget about that. Profile no longer exists. This is our profile. We're stuck with a flower and it's only going to be a flower. I don't make the rules yet. We're working with it. Right, so that's working. Now the next thing I need to do is I need to get this to actually move up. So the translation, it needs to be determined by the height. So we're going to go grab the height again. And that's going to be copy that parameter and paste relative references. I'm going to do it in the translation for now. I can also do it in the pivot translation. But for now, we're going to do that. So that is, it moved up 2 squares. This is not quite half a square. Let's see. Let's try 0.25 for now. Times. I need to add the multiplication thingamajig. That's still too much. Let's see. I think the archways were 0.1. We might just have got it. I hope we do. I really hope we do. It is Houdini, however, so it may just surprise me and not be it. But I think we've got it. We've got it. I'm happy. I'm very, very happy. Okay, so that's working. That's brilliant. We've now got a working flower. As you guys can see with Houdini, it's a lot of trial and error. It's a lot of playing around and seeing what works. But we got there in the end. Now, I think we can start sweeping this. I also want to add other things. What else do I want to add? I'll decide. We'll get there. So we're going to work with this as is, and we're going to add this to that. And I can't remember how to do this. So this is going to be interesting, but I want to get rid of the polygons in the center because I can't sweep them. I also want to figure out, let's get back to perspective view. I also need to see what I can do about the point order because that might mess us up. Yeah, because that's going 34, 35, and that's 45. There is a way of fixing this, if I can remember correctly. Let's try resample. That might fix it. But it also might not. We're running with it, so that is resample. Let's just see what it does to the points. That's 29, 30. It does fix it. Now I do not want that many points. Let's try 0.75. No. What was the value? 175 maybe. 1.7. Okay, that's not enough. Is that enough? No, and it looks very ugly. Right, so we're going to reduce that down to 1. Let's just leave it at 1 for now. We can always go back and change it later. So we've got that working. The next problem is we need to get rid of those faces. Now there is a way to do this, and there is a node for it, if I can remember what it's called. So you can get a curve from edges. We have liftoff, because Houdini is brilliant. Now the next thing I'm going to check is whether our point numbers have gone wonky. And they have not. Right, brilliant. So we also need to group this because we've got this brilliant network, but if we don't specify if we don't specify what it's called, we can't later isolate it when we want to sweep, right? Which is a problem because we do want to isolate these and do different profiles in each. Or maybe not even do different profiles, but just different scales. So we're going to group it. So that's going to be group. Brilliant. That's going to be called, what are we going to call it? Flower. Why not? Flower. Why are you giving me a warning? We're gonna leave it. If it gives us a problem later, we'll... But why is it giving us a problem? Group name. Oh, because I added a base group. Ha! Fixed it. So what the base group is basically you can add a group to a group, but we're not doing that. Right. So, flower. If I can spell, that would be very useful, wouldn't it? Right, so we've got that working. Now we need to start sweeping these. I'm also going to see how it looks once I've duplicated these around. Yeah, that's cool. That's very, very cool. Okay, focus. We are going to start sweeping. And we're going to need one for the outer, one for the inner, and one for the flower. We're also going to need a profile. We need to kind of decide what we want the profile to look like. So I like doing sort of a cross type of shape. But are we going to do that? I don't know. Let's start with it. We can always change it out later. So that's going to be a grid. Look at my bro. I built it earlier. So I was working on specifically the flower and just getting the arches in place. But earlier I built a thing that basically transforms it, so it moves it. So it moves it to what? Basically, if I adjust the width, the position adjusts accordingly. So wait, let me template that so you can actually see what we're working with here. So if the lantern gets bigger, that archway moves to stay within the lantern. Alright, so that's that. Then I've got something that duplicates it around. It's been like basically like duplicate spatial. It's called copy and transform, but it does exactly the same thing. So you basically take how many archways you want, and then I've made it very difficult for myself, have I? I could have simplified this. We're going to simplify this. But basically, you take 360, which is the circle, and you divide it by the number of copies to get your number. Now, I've done this in a very manual way, mainly because it's not set up in a way for me to add extra segments to the original lantern. I could do that, but it would take time. So I've just divided it by 60, but you can, in theory, go and copy this number, copy that parameter, take that away. No, zero that out. Do that, paste it, and then instead of doing that, you're going to do that 360 divided by the number of copies. Now, if I add extra ones, it'll continue duplicating around. Only downside to this is none of my other things are built for it. But for fun, we're going to leave it in case I ever do want to implement that. So that's going to be 360 times that. Right. Okay, so that's all working. And then the next thing is I just duplicate it across the top to get the top flat. Right, so sweep. And we need, where was I? We need a grid. We need a grid because we're going to build a profile. So grid. Now, here I'm going to be cheating a bit. I'm going to be cheating a bit because I'm trying to do this very procedurally. And I really do mean I'm trying to do this procedurally, but for certain things, it would just take long to do it. It would just take long to do this procedurally because there are ways of doing it, but I'm going to have to really wrap my brain around how to do it. So instead of doing that, I'm going to do it manually. And thank you, I'm glad you think it's beautiful. Yeah, it's not even a mesh, it's basically like a curve. So you've got your vertices, you've got your points, but it's just a curve, and we'll be sweeping it to get the actual geometry. And the sweeps are built in with automatic UVs that you can just turn on and all fun stuff, so saves you work later down the line. So to get across, we're probably going to need 3 edges there and there, and then I'm going to do the absolute worst thing you can do in Houdini, and I'm going to manually go in and select things. If anyone asks, I did not just manually delete something in Houdini. I did not do it. We're going to hide this somewhere that someone just will never see it again. It does not exist in any word, in any world. So I'm officially fired, guys. I'm not allowed to be anymore. Right, so we've got our cross shape. Definitely getting edited out. I'm putting in this special request for Mario to edit out me using manual selection in Houdini. Right, so we've got that. But actually, there is a way of not doing it manually. Let's start with a cube. Let's see if I can do this. I just want to see if I can do it, and then I'll be happy. So that's going to be a cube. Because now I'm curious. I'm very, very curious. Now, in theory, if I use a poly extrude, if I can actually type, that would be useful. I can use a poly extrude. And I don't want it to, I want it to not be attached. I can't remember how to do this. That's very useful. Let's see. Individual components. Alright. But I don't want everything to be affected. So if I do that, that's giving me a problem because it's now affecting all the faces, which I also don't want. So we're going to do plan B. We're going to do what? A group. We're going to group it. We're going to group the faces. So let's get our viewport sorted out because I can't see what I'm doing. Right, so we're going to do a group. And the group is going to be done with another no-no. And that is, it's going to be determined by boundary points. So, thank you. That's going to be, if I can actually sort my viewport out. Where am I? Okay, we're sorted. We're back on track. So, that's going, we can also do it by normals. That might be a more procedural way of doing it. We'll see if it works, okay? Because, okay, wait, that is display normals, display point rails. That might not work. In theory, in theory, if we keep by normals, we do want it to be primitives. We want it to select in 2 different directions. So that is direction, that's X, so that's left and right. So that we do want it to select left and right. And we do want it to select up and down. So that needs to be zeroed out. And that needs to be 1, and you can include that. But it's not actually selecting anything, is it? Ah, wait, it is. But it's selecting absolutely everything. So let's reduce that down. I think we've got it. We've got it. So that means no matter how far I scale this box, if I can stay on this thing, it'll still work. Brilliant. We've got a procedural. So, well, this part. So then I'm going to call this just select. Why not? Let's call it select. And we are going to now specify in the poly extrude we want select. And that's previewing, so let's just get that. And I accidentally adjusted the inset, that stays at 0, right? That now means I can adjust this manually down the line with control that I've been very lazy about implementing, mind you. So I'd say a value of 1.5 would be a square. Do we want it to be square? Not necessarily, but we're going to work with it. Now I want to get groups. I do want to get groups, but the problem is the way these are set up. If I say I want a group for front, that's going to mean it's going to group all these front faces, and I don't want that. And I don't want back either, because the back is basically the inside of us. So that doesn't help me. Side is going to be the side, so that's not going to help me either. Not quite as procedural, but we're going to use a boundary box. Are we going to use a boundary box? Are we really going to do that? Maybe. So that's going to be group. Now the reason we're grouping is because we want to group these things together so we could later go in and delete it without doing the no-no, which is manually selecting. We do not want to be manually selecting, and we're going to edit out the part where I do all the manual selecting. That in fact did not happen at all. In fact, it does not exist. So we're going to, in fact, I just said nothing at all. Nothing happened. So we're going to do keep by. If we do bounding region, we're going to run into, no, we're not going to run into a problem. We're going to do bounding region. And the size is going to be huge. So that's specifically on X and what else? X, Y. Actually, I'm probably going to scale and everything. So that's going to be, let's make it somewhat procedural, and we're going to take this value, make that just 1. Just so we can have a more consistent result here. Wait, let me check that. That's now going to be 1, right? So the bounding box is going to be, did I actually do that? We did. So that's going to be times 3. And then just a little bit extra for good measure. And that's also going to be 0, no, not 0, times 3.2. Yeah, let's do 3.2, why not? Right, so that's that. Now the problem is it's selecting everything, so we're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna paste that, but we're gonna divide it by 0.5. Now it's selecting 0.5, not 0. Now it's selecting a whole lot of nothing, which that's not ideal, is it? But we're now going to take also the width, and we're going to change the position on there. z-axis. But I'm starting to think of the next problem we're going to have, and that is that then the box will no longer be in the center of the world. It will then be slightly to the front. So we're quickly going to fix that first. And that's going to fix another problem. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it so that when I adjust the scale of the box, alright, when I adjust the scale of the box, it's going to stay behind this line on in the world. So I'm going to take the copy the parameter of this of the scale of the box, and I'm going to paste it into, which axis is that? That is the z-axis. So we're going to paste that, and we're going to divide it, or multiply it by 0.5, effectively dividing. But I want it to be, now let's leave it for like that for now and just see what it does. That works. That works. So that is going to be the, it's going to be the, what are we going to call it? Profile, sweep profile. So that's sweep profile. And I'm just going to duplicate this over or copy this over to the top so everything is consistent. And then I'm going to take this and blast. We're going to use a blast, but this time it's going to be procedural. And I'm going to take sweep profile and I'm going to delete non-selected. And that was a 30-minute demo of how you can make things very complicated if you want to keep it procedural. Taking the grid and selecting manually took me, what, 10 seconds, 20 seconds? This probably took closer to 20 to 30 minutes. Not quite as long, but it felt that way. But we've got a procedural curve. We can even go and do what? We can add bevels to this, so we can bevel it to get a different type of shape. And we can adjust the distance of it. Why is it only doing the corner? That's very annoying. Why is it doing that? That is very weird. That is really weird. But yeah, bottom line is we could do that, and we're going to reduce the amount of divisions. Now there's different settings here. You can do solid, you can do crease, you can do chamfer, round, all those fun stuff. All that fun stuff, mind you. So yeah. But I actually think we're going to leave it at the default. So let's forget about the bevel. I'm going off track here. So now we can finally get to the sweep. So what have we got here? So this is the sweep profile, and I'm starting to think I need to start organizing my nodes because I'm struggling to find stuff. But that is the profile. Not the profile, sorry. That is not, oh, actually, yeah, that is the profile, sorry. And then I need a curve. Which curve am I choosing? We're going to plug that into that. And that looks completely insane, but don't worry, there's a method to this madness. I'm going to choose outer arch. And why is it affecting everything? Let's just see what's going on. Okay, it's not affecting everything. The scale of the cross is just too big. It's just the scale of the cross that's kind of messing with us here. So what I'm going to do at this stage is I'm going to either go in here and I can scale it down, right? I can also reverse the cross section to get this the right way. So let's do that. And I've officially got an archway. But the problem is I'm going into the very, very small values here. And I didn't like that very much. So I am in fact going to scale the box. If I scale the box, do I want the extrude to scale accordingly? The problem with scaling the extrude, scaling according to the box. It means that it's going to stay square, which is fine. But if I ever want to change the distance, that's going to be a nuisance. So what I'm probably going to do is I'm going to scale the box first, and then I'll adjust the extrude accordingly. So that's going to go down. Wait, let me first take that back to a value of 1, so we can see what we're actually working with. And that's going to probably then be 0.1. And then let's just see what we're working with. We're going to do extrude, and that is way too long. So we're going to do what? The distance is going to be 0.1 to match with the cube. I can always go and change this later. And then going to make sure none of my selections broke, and it's Houdini. Of course it didn't. So we've got that working, and now in theory we've got our sweep working. Now that's still a very large archway, but it's small enough that we can work with it. Because even if I scale it down to 0.5, guess that is a small value, but we're not going into the 0.00 realm. So I would say a good scale for this archway specifically would be 2.5. So we've got that working. Now, I'm going to do the next one. So also the curve goes into that one. I'm going to plug this into that. And this is going to be also, this is probably going to be 0.1. At the moment, do I want the small arches? Well, let's start with the small arches. We're going to view that one. And we can now see one of our other problems, which is that the normals on one arch is facing in the opposite direction of the other arch. So that means if I then go here and I flip the normals, one of them is always going to be facing the wrong way. Now I can handle this in one of two ways. I can first sweep and then mirror, or I can adjust my mirror settings. Now this might work, or it might not. But let me see if we can get this to work. It's not gonna work, is it? Why does it have to be mean? I really don't want to split this out. I really don't want to split. Oh, because that's wrong mirror. That's wrong mirror. That is the wrong mirror. Okay, wait, let me see if I can actually fix this with the reverse, because that would be very convenient, but it's not going to be that nice, is it? Okay, so that's not an option. So no change. Let's do no change. If you do no change and we actually flip it over here, we have lift off. It's working. Okay, so that's working. And that's working. We're probably going to do another merge at some point. And after doing that merge, I'm really going to have to start organizing these nodes because we've got chaos. Right, so that's working. Next thing is the flower. So let's move that down. Let us move that down. And that's going to be that one, and we're going to specify it needs to be the flower. Now at this stage we can start thinking about, do we want the flower to be the same size sweep as the rest or not? Because that one is 0.1, but we're running into a problem here where the geometry isn't behaving very prettily. So we can change the stretch, but that's not really fixing anything. At this point, we can kind of start deciding, well, do we... Hi Stan, how are you? Do we want to change the profile of the flower in order to make it work? Or do we want to change the scale? Because if we scale the cross, at some stage it does work. But that's absolutely tiny. Like, do we really want to do that? So 0, 1 is even worse. Let's do 0.1 and see if there's a way we can make this more pretty. So the first thing I'm going to see is if what happens if I adjust the curve. Now our problem area lies at the bottom of the curve. So if I'm correct, that's this piece over here. So that is where our problem lies. And I'm really screwing this up. So let's see what else I can do. It's actually very difficult to see what I'm doing. Okay, we're going to move down. We'll back up the network, let's say. We're going to go to this one. Now, our problem comes from how narrow this area is here. So when we're adjusting the curve, we want to adjust that area specifically. So let's see. We want that to be bigger. So I actually like that shape quite a lot. That's not really going to help me. This could potentially help me. So the next problem here is probably there. Now I'm quickly going to check if I ruined my transform. And I did. Did I? Let's see. Because we do still want this to be flat. Because otherwise we're going to ruin a bunch of other stuff. So let's just fix the transform now that we've changed the shape. So that's probably going to be 0.15. 0.15. Perfect. Right, so we've got that. Now I'm also going to see what the resample is doing. Because since we changed the shape, it might need a different value. Let's just leave that at 1. And then we can start playing around. We can do maximum segments. How many do you think should be the maximum? Let's try 100. And that does not look very pretty. So we can do that. Or resample. Let's do that. Wait, let me see what's going on here. No, we don't want normals. We want the points. And herein lies our problem, right? It was these vertices that were messing us up. Why do I keep changing that? Because these vertices are too close together. And that's why the profile was kind of overlapping. So it was firstly the way the vertices were set up, but secondly also just the shape. Now, do we want even sectors? Let's do that. We can also do subdivision curves, but I think that's just going to give us very rounded. Let's see for now. Let's see. I'm going to leave it at that for now. Let's just see what it does. If it's bad, we can just go back and fix it again. That is, in fact, weird that it was. Thank you. I'm enjoying myself. I think that helps. If I was just so focused on being stressed about it, I wouldn't do very well. But I'm really enjoying it. So, let's see. Okay, so subdivision curves and work. Straight edges are not much better. What are we going to do? I'm going to test something, and that is as follows. Where's the resample? I'm going to do a blast. Don't kill me. And I'm going to do it manually, but I just want to see whether it's these points in these corners that's messing it up, or whether there's something else that's messing it up. So we're going to go and do points. And I'm going to go and select these guys. And we're going to see whether it's that or whether something else is going on. So delete that. If it's that, we can look into fixing it. Let's frame that. Let's go to perspective so we can see what's going on here. So it's not that. Let's see. The next thing we can try is we can take a look at the normals. Because the normals are quite interesting. So let's see what it does if we do orient along curve. Now this might work or it might not because it's already kind of orienting. But let's see if it actually fixes anything. It does. It fixes it. Okay, so the problem was not the shape of the it was not the shape of the flower, and probably wasn't. We can test it, but it probably wasn't the points as either the extra ones that were in the corner. It was most likely all due to the normals. Now, something to note is these are still technically overlapping. You're not going to fix that unless you really adjust the shape of your original curve. So I'm going to leave that at that. I would probably fix this before I would export this to Maya, and I would fix it before doing UVs and all that fun stuff. So it would be fixed at some point. You can also adjust the stretch, which helps. Something else to note that I don't even know if it's visible here. But where is my stuff? Right, so in our original shape, if I can frame this at some point, these edges, right? There's an edge, there's an edge, there's an edge. Now, how these profiles work is when you're sweeping, it adds these edges on the inside. So in theory, if I get rid of them, I will get a slightly marginally cleaner result. So not a blast, that's a dissolve. It's not perfect, and it won't really fix our overlap. I actually want this on everything, so can we get that on everything? Let me get rid of that for a moment. And we're going to do dissolve. But it will be slightly neater. So if we dissolve those, and we sweep those. Again, this corner here is still a problem area, but it's better. And better is at this stage good enough. It'll do its job. Now again, this corner here is not ideal. You would fix this before you textured. You would fix this before you did your UVs. But for what we're doing right now, it's fine. So we've got that. I don't know if I'm happy with the scale yet, but let's just get these together and see what we're working with. So that's a merge. I actually don't want these to merge over here, so we're going to get rid of those. And I want this one, I want that one, and I want this one. And then that's going to go into that. And let's see. And that's working. And I'm very happy. I'm very, very happy that's working. I don't know if I'm happy with the scale of specifically. Okay, so here's where I'm seeing two problems. The first problem is these aren't touching. I do want them to touch. But on the flip side, in this corner here, it's intersecting. I do not want it to intersect. So we're going to go back up, and I believe it's in the transform somewhere. I really need to start making notes and organizing these, so these types of fixes are easier. But let's do 4, 5. No. Okay, that's going to be closer to 35. Awful number. It is an awful number, but we're going to work with it. Um, no, your streams are great. I think there's different styles of streaming. I can't talk about random things and entertain people. But I can talk forever about things I find interesting, which is Houdini. I find Houdini very interesting. So it's a different type of good. I would never be able to spend 2 hours in ZBrush and talk and entertain people as well as teaching people at the same time. But if I can spend 2 hours just talking about a topic I'm interested in and passionate about, and I can teach people, I'm happy. I'm very happy then. So I'm putting nobody to shame, just showing there's different methods of doing things and being fun, and enjoying yourself. But I will admit, I do have a lot to learn from you, Heather, and especially in regards to the actual being entertaining part. I can do the educational part, but the entertaining part is more difficult. But we're going to work with it and we're going to make it fun. So, right, so I did fix this overlap in the center, but now if I adjust the scale, that value is going to need to change. So I am going to change the scale, and there you can see that jumps. Now that's fine. It's not completely procedural because also keep in mind if I change the what? If I change the scale of the profile of the what? Of the sweep, this value is going to become void, which is not procedural. That's really not procedural, which is fine, but it does come with its challenges. So I would have to make kind of a decision at this point and decide, do I want the ability to change the scale, the profile of these arches specifically, and also the outer arch? Because if I change the outer arch, that's also going to have an impact on the distance. Now, there are ways of combining these values to say, well, keep the width, keep the width of the lantern in account, but also keep the width of the sweep into account. But that is a bit above my area of expertise. This is still, I would not say beginner level Houdini, but it's beginner to intermediate level Houdini. So if I were to take these values and try to multiply them together in a way to make them work together, so that if I change the scale of the lantern and I also change the scale of the profile, that they both work. Now that's an area of Houdini that I do not know. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I'm not advanced enough to do that. So I can start researching that. I can do that and figuring it out. And I do think that's something I would do. But at this stage, it's not something I know how to do. So I would say, in this case specifically, I would leave it as is. And I'll prioritize the adjustability of the actual lantern over the adjustability of the profiles of the sweeps. And sometimes when you're building procedural stuff like this, you have to make this calls. What is the most important part? Quickly going to turn AC off because I am cold. If it's gonna work, it's not gonna work. Okay, so I'm not freezing. Okay, fantastic. Moving on. So, in conclusion, I've decided I'm not going to change the size of the curve on specifically the archways. I might still change it on the flower. So, having that in mind, I need to kind of decide, am I happy with how these are connecting to the sides here? And I would say not quite. So let's see, 2, 5. Now that works, but then the other side won't work. Let's do 1, 5 here. And then we're going to do Take that back to, no, 2, 5. It's not enough, 3. And here's where it gets problematic. Because as you guys know, I've got my favorite numbers and my least favorite numbers and all those fun things. In this case, I'm being forced to start using more random numbers, which is not ideal. It gets the job done, but it is much more difficult to get it to a value. Because let's say, for example, I wanted to take this number and then copy that parameter, paste it somewhere else, and then start multiplying that around. A value of 0.23 is a lot more difficult to work with. So it is something I'm keeping in mind, but for this use case, it's fine. It's fine. We'll work with it. Right, so that's working. Now, as I've said, I'm not sure about the size of this sweep on specifically this archway. I'm just going to see what different values do. Do I prefer it to look a bit bigger? Do I want it smaller? I actually like that. I can always change it later because it's Houdini. And Houdini is procedural, so... Right, so we've got that. We've got that. And now... let's do a merge, so we can actually see what it looks like at this point in time. And then I really need to start organizing these all nodes because they're a bit all over the place. Right, so that is gonna merge down here. And that works. And now the big question is, let's just get our control down here. We would obviously implement controls for the archways as well, but let's just see what we're working with at this stage. If I adjust the width, everything scales accordingly. So that's all well and good. Within till a point, right? At some point it does get a little wonky. Something to note, our curves are disappearing a bit and this is going wonky in the corners. So that is something we'll have to keep in mind. We'll either have to change the value this archway scales at. Now we're probably going to have to do that, which is inconvenient because that means we're going to have to change the outer archway, the inner archways, and the flower. But for now, we've got this working. Next thing to test is the height. And that is also working. And something I'm realizing at this point is when I'm looking at my reference here, I'm not happy with how little of the arch is actually showing. I would want to do two things. I would want first to scale it in on the x-axis, but I would also like to make it a little bit taller. So I'm going to hope, and I really do mean I'm going to hope that the values I set were determined by, it was not, okay, it's fine, we'll adjust it in two places. What I was hoping is that I use the height of the big archway to determine the height of the little archways. But instead of doing that, I'm pretty sure I used the height of the original lantern, which is fine. It'll just mean I'll have to adjust it in two places. So let's do that height, so that can be 3 or maybe 4. And then this will be probably double. Alright. And then that obviously means everything else broke as well. So we're going to have to go to our flower and adjust that transform as well. So that's probably going to be 2. Right. I want to get rid of the box, but do I want to do it now? Do I want to do it now? I don't know if I want to do it now, but let's keep it like that for a moment and just see what it's doing. I do prefer that. I'm going to take that away for a second because I just want to see what the actual curves are looking like without the box hiding the curve of the archways, specifically the small ones. I'd actually want to scale those up, mind you, but not in a uniform scale. I don't want to scale it up like that. I want to scale up specific areas of them. So I'm just going to see which part of this affects what. Apply scale along curve. Why is it being a nuisance? Okay, so that's working. Can I add a thingamajig? Yes, I can. So that is the top. So leave that there, and then I'm gonna scale these down, and then I'm gonna add the. I wonder if I can select both of these at the same time. No. Is it really gonna be that annoying? Okay, wait, we've got it. I'll adjust the global scale. So that'll probably be 0.2, roughly. And then I can decide how much I want here. It just adds a little bit of interest. Right, so that's that. And then that looks better as well. Right, so that's working. And I think that's a good place to leave it today. So thank you everyone for being here and supporting me for my first stream and hanging out and chatting with me. It was absolutely brilliant, and thank you for sharing the joy of Houdini with me. So yeah, thank you and enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll be leaving you guys now. So goodbye.